The Memory Thief. Part 1. The Missing Wednesday. The note was in my own handwriting. Margaret Walsh stared at the paper she'd found tucked inside her journal, her heart pounding as she read the words again. Margaret, don't trust Dr. Foster. You wrote this on Tuesday. Today is Thursday. If you're reading this, they've taken Wednesday from you. She sat down heavily at her kitchen table, the morning sun streaming through the window of her townhouse at Riverside Senior Living. Thursday. It was Thursday morning, March 16th. She checked her phone to confirm. Yes, Thursday. But what had she done on Wednesday? Margaret closed her eyes and tried to remember. Tuesday had been clear. She'd had lunch with her daughter. Claire worked on her memoir about teaching psychology at the university, taken her evening walk. Then, nothing. A blank space where Wednesday should be. She grabbed her planner. Wednesday, March 15th, had an entry in her handwriting, 2 p.m., Dr. Foster. Memory care session. Dr. Raymond Foster, her neurologist. The man everyone at Riverside Senior Living trusted implicitly. Margaret had started seeing Dr. Foster 6 months ago when she'd begun experiencing occasional memory lapses. Small things at first, forgetting where she'd put her keys, losing track of conversations. At 68, with a family history of Alzheimer's, she'd been terrified. Dr. Foster had been reassuring, prescribing a new medication called Memorex that he said would help preserve her cognitive function. But this wasn't a small lapse. This was an entire day, vanished. Margaret stood and walked to her bathroom, where her pill organizer sat on the counter. Wednesday's compartment was empty. She'd taken her medications, but she had no memory of doing so. She pulled out her phone and checked her bank app, something she did every morning. Her checking account showed a transaction from Wednesday. $500 withdrawal from an ATM. She never used ATMs. She never carried that much cash. Her hands trembled as she scrolled further. There was also a charge to Sterling and Associates law firm for $2,000. Estate planning consultation, the description read. Margaret had no memory of visiting an ATM. No memory of going to a law firm. No memory of Wednesday at all. But she'd written herself a note warning about Dr. Foster, which meant that on Tuesday, before whatever happened on Wednesday, she'd suspected something was wrong. She went to her desk and opened her laptop, checking her email. There was a message sent Wednesday at 3:47 p.m. from her own email account to Sterling and Associates law firm. Please proceed with the changes to my will as we discussed. I want to ensure the Riverside Senior Living Foundation receives the bulk of my estate. My daughter Claire has been distant, and I feel my resources would be better used helping seniors in need. Margaret felt sick. She would never write that. Claire wasn't distant. They had lunch every Tuesday. And she would never leave her estate to a foundation. She barely knew about the will, leaving her estate to the foundations rather than to her only child. But the email had her signature, her writing style, details only she would know. Someone had sent that email while she was what? Unconscious? Drugged? Manipulated? She grabbed her journal and began writing everything down, documenting the gaps, the transactions, the email. If someone was stealing her memories, she needed to create a record they couldn't take. As she wrote, Margaret's academic training kicked in. She'd spent 40 years as a psychology professor, studying memory, cognition, and consciousness. She knew the difference between dementia and manipulation. Alzheimer's didn't make you forget a specific day, while leaving everything else intact. It didn't cause you to perform complex tasks with no recollection. This was something else. Margaret picked up her phone to call Claire, then hesitated. If someone was monitoring her communications, calling her daughter might put Claire at risk. Instead, she texted, "Need to see you. Don't call, just come. Important." While she waited, Margaret searched her townhouse methodically. In her bedroom closet, behind her winter coats. She found a small camera, the kind used for home security. It wasn't hers. She'd never installed cameras. Someone was watching her. Margaret's mind raced. She went to her bookshelf and pulled out a thick textbook on neuropsychology. She hollowed it out months ago as a joke, hiding place for emergency cash. The money was still there, $500 in 20s. But there was something else, a USB drive she didn't recognize. She plugged it into her laptop. The drive contained video files, all dated within the past 6 months. She clicked on the most recent one, dated yesterday, Wednesday. The video showed Dr. Foster's office. Margaret sat in a chair, but something was wrong with her. Her eyes were unfocused, her movements sluggish. Dr. Foster sat across from her, speaking in a calm, measured voice. "Margaret, you're going to make some changes to your will today. You've been thinking about it for weeks. You want to leave your estate to the Riverside Senior Living Foundation. It's what you've always wanted. Can you repeat that back to me?" On screen, Margaret's voice was slow and slurred. "I want to leave my estate to the foundation." "Good. And your daughter Claire has been distant, hasn't she? You barely see her anymore." "Yes. Claire is distant. You're going to visit Sterling and Associates this afternoon. And make these changes. You'll withdraw $500 in cash. You like having cash on hand. When you come home, you'll take your evening medications and go to sleep. Tomorrow, you won't remember today. You'll check your calendar and see you had a memory care session with me. And you'll feel grateful that I'm helping you. Do you understand?" "I understand." Dr. Foster smiled. "Excellent. Now, when I count to 3, you'll wake up feeling refreshed and ready for your appointments. 1, 2, 3. On screen, Margaret blinked and sat up straighter, her eyes clearing. "I'm sorry, Dr. Foster. I must have dozed off for a moment." "Perfectly normal," he said warmly. "The relaxation exercises can be very calming. Now, I've written down some errands you wanted to run this afternoon. Just follow this list." The video ended. Margaret sat in stunned silence, nausea rising in her throat. Dr. Foster had drugged her, hypnotized her, and sent her out to execute tasks she would never normally do, all while ensuring she'd have no memory of it. But why? And how many times had he done this? She clicked through more video files. They went back months. In each one, Dr. Foster had her in the same trance-like state, giving her instructions. "Change your will. Sign these papers. Transfer this money. Call this number and say these words." Margaret had been a puppet, and Dr. Foster had been pulling the strings. But who had made these recordings? And why had they given her the USB drive? A knock at the door made her jump. She closed the laptop quickly and looked through the peephole. Claire stood outside, looking worried. Margaret opened the door and pulled her daughter inside. "Mom, what's wrong? Your text scared me." "Claire, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't interrupt, don't tell me I'm confused, just listen." She told her daughter everything: the missing day, the note, the videos. Claire's expression shifted from concern to disbelief to horror. "We need to call the police," Claire said. "Not yet. If we go to the police now, Dr. Foster will claim I'm delusional. He'll say I'm experiencing paranoid delusions due to cognitive decline. He'll use my age and my early Alzheimer's symptoms against me. We need more evidence. We need to know how many others he's done this to." "Others?" Claire's eyes widened. "Think about it. Why would he set up such an elaborate scheme for just one person? This takes time, planning, resources. He must be doing this to multiple people at Riverside." Margaret's academic mind was fully engaged now, analyzing the problem like a research puzzle. "I need to stop taking my medications immediately. Whatever he's giving me is making me susceptible to hypnosis. I need to document everything and find other victims. And I need to figure out who gave me these videos. Mom, this is too dangerous. Claire, I'm 68 years old. I'm being robbed and manipulated, and my own doctor is erasing my memories. Dangerous doesn't frighten me. Being helpless does. Margaret took a breath. I spent my entire career studying the human mind. I'm not going to let someone use that knowledge against me or anyone else. We're going to stop him. Over the next 3 days, Margaret became a detective in her own life. She stopped taking all medications Dr. Foster had prescribed, telling no one, not even Claire. She felt clearer almost immediately, which confirmed her suspicions that the drugs had been clouding her cognition. She began documenting everything in multiple locations, handwritten journals, hidden throughout her townhouse. Encrypted files on her laptop with backups in cloud storage, and even old-fashioned notes mailed to herself at Claire's address. She also started paying attention to other residents at Riverside Senior Living. Riverside was an upscale continuing care retirement community with 200 residents, most between 65 and 85. It offered independent living, assisted living, and memory care units. Dr. Foster served as the community's primary geriatric specialist, and many residents saw him regularly. Margaret began having coffee in the common areas, attending activity groups, and chatting with neighbors she'd previously only nodded to in passing. She was looking for patterns. She found them. Helen Rodriguez, 73, mentioned that she'd been scatterbrained lately and couldn't remember a whole weekend last month. She'd found receipts for purchases she didn't recall making. George Patterson, 76, laughed about losing track of time. During his weekly sessions with Dr. Foster, he'd wake up in the evening not remembering the afternoon. Patricia Chen, 70, had recently changed her will to leave a substantial donation to the Riverside Senior Living Foundation, a decision that surprised her children, especially since Patricia had always planned to split everything equally among them. All three saw Dr. Foster regularly. All three had memory gaps. All three had made unusual financial decisions. Margaret needed to talk to them privately, but she had to be careful. If Dr. Foster realized she was investigating, he might accelerate whatever he was doing, or worse. She started with Helen, inviting her for tea in her townhouse. Helen, I'm going to ask you something strange, and I need you to trust me. Have you ever felt like Dr. Foster's sessions leave you feeling foggy or confused? Helen's expression shifted from friendly to guarded. Why would you ask that? Because I think he's doing something to us. Something beyond normal medical care. Helen was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood and locked Margaret's door. When she turned back, her expression was completely different, sharp, alert, suspicious. Who gave you the videos? Helen asked. Margaret's heart skipped. What? The videos of Foster manipulating patients. Who gave them to you? Was it Thomas? I don't know who Thomas is. I found a USB drive in my house. Helen studied her carefully, then made a decision. Come with me. They walked to Helen's townhouse 3 doors down. Helen checked that no one was watching, then led Margaret inside. From a locked drawer, Helen pulled out her own laptop. I'm not a confused elderly woman, Helen said. I'm a former FBI agent. I retired 3 years ago and moved here. 6 months ago, I started noticing irregularities, residents with memory problems, unusual financial transactions, behavioral changes. I began investigating quietly. She opened a file on her computer. Dr. Raymond Foster has been running this scheme for at least 5 years, possibly longer. He targets wealthy seniors with early cognitive issues or family problems. He uses a combination of sedatives and hypnotic suggestion during therapy sessions to manipulate them into making financial decisions that benefit him and his partners. Partners? Margaret asked. The Riverside Senior Living Foundation is a front. It's controlled by Foster and two others, Martin Crenshaw, the Riverside administrator, and Elizabeth Sterling, a lawyer at Sterling and Associates. They've stolen approximately $8 million from residents. Over the past 5 years. Margaret felt dizzy. You're FBI. Why haven't you arrested them? Because I needed evidence that would hold up in court. Foster is careful. He never puts anything in writing. Never uses the same pattern twice, always has plausible deniability. The medications he uses leave the system quickly. The hypnosis sessions could be explained as legitimate therapy. Without hard evidence, it would be my word against a respected doctor. So you've been gathering evidence. For 6 months. I've been installing hidden cameras in Foster's office, recording sessions, tracking financial transactions. I have enough now to move forward. But there's a problem. Helen's expression darkened. 2 weeks ago, Foster became suspicious. He's been more careful, checking for surveillance. Worse, I think he's planning something big, one final score before he disappears. I've seen communications between him and his partners about liquidating assets and closing out accounts. They're planning to run, which means they'll cover their tracks. Which means destroying evidence, Margaret said. And possibly silencing witnesses. Exactly. I was going to move forward with arrests this week. But I need a few more pieces of evidence. That's why I gave you the USB drive. I needed someone else to know what was happening in case something happened to me. You put the drive in my house? I've had access to your townhouse for months, Helen admitted. I've been protecting you, Margaret. When I realized Foster had targeted you, I started monitoring your home, intercepting some of his manipulations, documenting everything. You're one of his primary targets. Because of your estate size and your medical history. Margaret processed this. So you've been watching me. I've been protecting you. There's a difference. What do we do now? Helen pulled out a phone. Now, we spring the trap. I'm calling my former partner at the FBI. We're going to bring Foster in tonight, along with Crenshaw and Sterling. But I need your help. How? You're going to keep your appointment with Dr. Foster this afternoon. You're going to let him think you're still under his control. And you're going to wear a wire that will record everything he says. Can you do that? Margaret thought about all the residents who'd been victimized, all the families torn apart by manipulated wills. All the vulnerable seniors who'd lost their autonomy. I can do that, she said. If you're enjoying this psychological thriller, I'd really appreciate it. If you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life. Now, let's continue with Margaret's dangerous mission. Part 2: The Confrontation. Margaret sat in Dr. Foster's waiting room at 2 o'clock. Her heart pounding beneath the wire Helen had carefully taped to her chest. The tiny microphone was invisible under her blouse, transmitting everything to Helen and 2 FBI agents waiting in a van outside. Dr. Foster's office was in the medical wing of Riverside Senior Living, a professional space, with warm lighting and comfortable furniture designed to put elderly patients at ease. Margaret had been here dozens of times. She'd trusted this man. The door opened. Dr. Foster stood there, tall and distinguished at 52, with silver-streaked hair and a warm smile that had fooled her completely. Margaret, please come in. She entered the office, taking her usual seat. Dr. Foster settled across from her, his notebook open on his lap. How have you been feeling this week? He asked. A bit confused, Margaret said, playing her role. I had another memory gap. Wednesday is just blank. Dr. Foster's expression was perfectly concerned. I'm sorry to hear that. These gaps are becoming more frequent, aren't they? Yes. It worries me. Of course it does. But that's why we're working together. The Memorex is helping slow the progression. And our therapy sessions are giving you tools to cope with the lapses when they occur. Margaret forced herself to nod. I trust you, Drive. Foster. I'm glad. Because I'm going to help you relax now, just like we always do. I want you to focus on your breathing. Deep breath in and out. His voice took on that rhythmic, soothing quality she'd heard in the videos. Margaret had prepared for this. She'd spent the morning researching resistance to hypnosis, reminding herself that hypnosis only worked with consent, that she could break it at any time. But she needed to let him think it was working. She slowed her breathing, let her eyes go unfocused. Mimicked the slurred speech she'd seen in the videos. That's good, Margaret. You're doing very well. Now, we need to talk about your estate planning. You've been thinking about this, haven't you? You want to make sure your resources help others after you're gone. Yes. Margaret made her voice slow and dreamy. You're going to make a final change to your will. You're going to leave everything to the Riverside Senior Living Foundation. All of it. Your daughter Claire has been so distant lately. Claire is distant. That's right. And you've realized that your money could help so many seniors here at Riverside. It's what you want. It's what you've always wanted. Always wanted. Dr. Foster leaned forward. Tomorrow, you're going to call Elizabeth Sterling and tell her you want to make these final changes. You'll sign the new will by the end of the week. The foundation will receive everything, your house, your savings, all of it. About $1.2 million total. And you'll feel good about this decision because it's what you truly want. Margaret fought to keep her breathing steady, to not react to hearing her net worth spoken aloud like that. He'd researched her finances thoroughly. After you sign the will, Drive. Foster continued, you're going to stop worrying about your memory problems. You'll trust me completely to handle your medical care. If you feel confused or concerned, you'll come to me first, before talking to anyone else. Do you understand? I understand. Good. Now, there's one more thing. If anyone asks you questions about our sessions, you'll tell them everything is fine. That I'm a wonderful doctor helping you through a difficult time. You'll defend me. Protecting me is protecting yourself. Margaret felt rage building beneath her pretended trance. This was how he'd maintained his scheme, by programming his victims to defend him. I'll defend you, she said. Excellent. Now, when I count to 3. The door burst open. Helen stood there, FBI credentials in one hand, 3 armed agents behind her. Dr. Raymond Foster, you're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. Dr. Foster jumped to his feet. What is this? Get out of my office. This is a private medical session. It's a crime scene, Helen said coldly. Margaret, you can stop pretending now. Margaret opened her eyes fully and sat up straight. Hello, Drive. Foster. I'm not actually hypnotized. I'm just really angry. The color drained from Foster's face. How did you? I'm a psychologist, Margaret said, standing. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize what you were doing once I stopped taking your drugs? You're not nearly as clever as you think you are. 2 agents moved forward with handcuffs. Dr. Foster backed against his desk. You can't prove anything. This will be dismissed as the paranoid delusions of a woman with dementia. We have everything, Helen interrupted. Video evidence of you manipulating patients under hypnosis. Audio recordings of you admitting to the financial scheme. Bank records showing transfers from victims to your foundation. Emails between you and your partners. Testimony from 12 victims. It's over, Foster. As they cuffed him, Dr. Foster's professional mask finally cracked. Those people were dying anyway. They were going to lose their money. To nursing homes and medical bills. I gave them purpose. That money funded programs, helped other seniors. You stole $8 million, Helen said flatly. You destroyed lives, turned family members against each other, and took away people's autonomy. That's not helping. That's predation. They let him out. Margaret watched him go, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Relief, anger, and something like grief for the trust she'd lost. Helen turned to her. You did well. That recording will be crucial evidence. What happens now? Margaret asked. We've arrested Martin Crenshaw and Elizabeth Sterling as well. We'll be interviewing all potential victims, gathering statements, building the case. This is going to make national news. It's an upscale retirement community where a doctor systematically manipulated wealthy seniors. It's going to cause ripples. Good, Margaret said. Maybe those ripples will help prevent the next Raymond Foster. Over the next few days, the full scope of the scheme became clear. Dr. Foster had victimized 23 residents over 5 years. Some had lost thousands, others hundreds of thousands. Some were still alive to reclaim their money, others had died. Their families never knowing their loved ones had been manipulated. The method had been ingeniously evil. Foster had identified the vulnerable. Seniors, those with early cognitive issues, strained family relationships, or who were simply lonely and trusting. He prescribed medications that made them more suggestible. During therapy sessions, he used hypnosis to implant false memories and compel specific actions. The victims would carry out complex tasks with no memory of doing so. And Foster ensured they were programmed to defend him if questioned. The Riverside Senior Living Foundation was a shell organization. Money donated to it was funneled through several accounts. Before ending up with Foster, Crenshaw, and Sterling, they'd been preparing to close the foundation and disappear with one final round of transfers. Margaret's case had been meant to be part of that final round. Her $1.2 million estate would have pushed their total take to over $9 million. But Helen's investigation had stopped them just in time. The arrests made national news. CNN ran a segment on elder exploitation. The FBI announced a task force to investigate similar schemes. At other retirement communities, advocacy groups called for stronger protections for seniors. And Margaret found herself at the center of it all. We're halfway through Margaret's fight for justice. If you're invested in this story, please show your support with a like and subscribe. It helps more people discover these important stories. Now, let's see what happens next. Part 3: The Aftermath. 3 weeks after the arrests, Margaret sat in a television studio, preparing for an interview with a national morning show. Claire sat beside her, supportive but worried. Mom, are you sure you want to do this? You don't have to be the face of this story. Yes, I do, Margaret said. Because if I hide, people will think I'm ashamed. They'll think I was a helpless victim who got fooled. But I wasn't helpless. I fought back. And other people need to know they can fight back too. The interview was straightforward but emotional. Margaret explained how she'd discovered the manipulation, how she'd worked with Helen to expose Foster, and how she'd learned to trust her own mind again despite the trauma. The interviewer asked the question Margaret had been expecting. Dr. Foster claims that your accusations stem from paranoid delusions related to cognitive decline. How do you respond to that? Margaret looked directly at the camera. That's exactly what predators want you to think. That elderly people who report abuse are just confused. But I'm a retired psychology professor with 40 years of experience studying the human mind. I know the difference between dementia and manipulation. And the FBI's evidence proves I was right. This isn't about my age or my cognitive status. This is about criminal behavior being disguised as medical care. After the interview aired, Margaret's phone didn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted her story. Advocacy groups wanted her to speak. Other seniors reached out, sharing their own stories of manipulation and exploitation. One call stood out. A woman named Barbara Reynolds from Florida said her mother had died at a retirement community, where a doctor had been treating her for memory issues. Barbara had always wondered why her mother suddenly changed her will right before dying. Now, after seeing Margaret's story, she was filing a police report. Margaret realized this was bigger than just Raymond Foster. This was a national issue. The trial began 6 months later. Dr. Raymond Foster pleaded not guilty, his expensive lawyers arguing that he'd been providing legitimate medical care, and that any financial transactions were the result of patients' autonomous decisions, made while cognitively impaired but still legally competent. Martin Crenshaw and Elizabeth Sterling had both taken plea deals, agreeing to testify against Foster in exchange for reduced sentences. Margaret was the prosecution's star witness. She took the stand on the third day of the trial, wearing a navy suit and her reading glasses, looking every bit the former professor she was. The prosecuting attorney walked her through her testimony, the memory gaps, finding the videos, working with Helen, wearing the wire. Then came cross-examination. Foster's attorney was a sharp and expensive defense lawyer named Marcus Webb, who specialized in making victims look unreliable. Dr. Walsh, Professor Walsh, you were diagnosed with early-stage cognitive impairment 6 months before these alleged events, correct? I was experiencing minor memory lapses, yes. And you were prescribed medication for these cognitive issues? Yes, by Dr. Foster. So you were taking mind-altering medications during the time you claim to have discovered this conspiracy? I stopped taking them when I realized they were part of the problem. But you admit you were on cognitive medications, experiencing memory problems, and under stress after your husband's death 5 years ago? Margaret kept her voice steady. Yes. Which is exactly why Dr. Foster targeted me. He chose victims who had early cognitive symptoms, so he could hide his crimes behind our diagnoses. Or, Webb suggested smoothly, perhaps you misinterpreted legitimate medical care through the lens of paranoia, caused by your cognitive decline? No, Margaret said firmly. And the FBI's physical evidence proves that. The FBI's evidence shows videos that could be interpreted multiple ways. Dr. Foster claims these were legitimate hypnotherapy sessions for anxiety management. Then why did he tell me to change my will while under hypnosis? Why did he program me to withdraw cash and visit a lawyer I'd never heard of? Dr. Foster never told you to do anything. He made therapeutic suggestions while you were in a relaxed state. You chose to act on them. Margaret leaned forward. Mr. Webb, I spent 40 years studying psychology, including hypnosis and suggestive therapy. What Dr. Foster did wasn't therapy, it was manipulation. He used drugs to make me vulnerable, hypnosis to implant false memories, and post-hypnotic suggestion to control my behavior. That's not medicine. That's a crime. Webb smiled thinly. A crime you only discovered after a convenient visit from a former FBI agent, who just happened to be conducting her own investigation. Helen Rodriguez was investigating because she noticed patterns of financial exploitation. I was one of many victims. Or perhaps Ms. Rodriguez, who had been forced into early retirement from the FBI for insubordination, saw an opportunity to make herself relevant again by manufacturing a conspiracy? The prosecutor objected. The judge sustained. But the seed was planted. Maybe Helen had fabricated evidence. And maybe Margaret's accusations were the product of cognitive decline and manipulation by an overzealous former agent. That evening, Margaret sat in her townhouse feeling defeated. Claire brought dinner and tried to be encouraging. You did great today, Mom. You were clear and confident. But he made me look like a paranoid old woman, being manipulated by Helen instead of by Foster. The jury will see through that. They have the videos, the financial records, which Webb is trying to reframe as legitimate therapy, and autonomous financial decisions. Margaret rubbed her temples. This is the problem with elder abuse cases. The victim's age and cognitive status become weapons against them. If I were 40, no one would question my testimony. But at 68, with a history of memory problems, I'm automatically unreliable. That's not fair. No, it's not. But it's reality. The next day, Helen took the stand. She explained her investigation, her credentials, her evidence-gathering techniques. Under cross-examination, Webb went after her early retirement, her unauthorized surveillance, her personal grudge against the medical establishment. After her mother died in a nursing home under questionable care. By the time Helen stepped down, Webb had painted her as a bitter person. Boundary-violating former agent conducting a vigilante investigation. Then the defense called its surprise witness Dr. Patricia Morrison, a renowned neurologist specializing in dementia. Dr. Morrison testified that Margaret's symptoms were consistent with mild cognitive impairment, progressing to early Alzheimer's. She stated that patients at this stage often experienced paranoid delusions, false memories, and confabulation, creating detailed narratives that felt true, but weren't based in reality. Is it possible, Webb asked, that Professor Walsh experienced genuine memory lapses due to her cognitive decline? Then constructed an elaborate conspiracy theory to explain those lapses, rather than accepting that she has a progressive neurological condition? It's not only possible, it's common, Dr. Morrison said. Many early-stage dementia patients create complex explanations for their symptoms, because accepting the diagnosis is too frightening. Margaret felt sick. This doctor was using real medical information about dementia to provide cover for a criminal. When the prosecution got to cross-examine Dr. Morrison, they asked, "Have you reviewed the video evidence showing Dr. Foster giving Professor Walsh specific instructions while she was under hypnosis?" "I have." "And does legitimate hypnotherapy include telling a patient to change their will and transfer funds to a specific foundation?" "Hypnotherapy can include suggestions about life changes, including financial planning, if the patient has expressed concerns about those areas." Did Professor Walsh express concerns about her will? According to Dr. Foster's notes, yes. Those notes written by Dr. Foster himself? Yes. So we only have the word of the accused that these were legitimate therapeutic interventions? Dr. Morrison hesitated. Clinically speaking, yes. The trial continued for 2 more weeks. Martin Crenshaw testified about Foster's manipulation of residents and the scheme to funnel money through the foundation. Elizabeth Sterling described how she'd been recruited to create wills and estate plans that benefited Foster's organization, always ensuring the paperwork was technically legal, even though the decisions behind it weren't authentic. Other victims testified 12 seniors who'd been manipulated by Foster. Some were sharp and credible. Others showed obvious cognitive impairment, making their testimony less compelling, even though it was true. Finally, closing arguments. The prosecutor laid out the evidence, videos, financial records, testimony from Foster's co-conspirators, patterns of manipulation across dozens of victims. Webb argued that the evidence showed nothing more than a doctor providing aggressive but legal care to seniors with cognitive impairment, who then made their own financial decisions while impaired. He emphasized Margaret's cognitive issues and Helen's questionable investigative methods. The prosecution wants you to believe that a respected doctor spent years running an elaborate criminal scheme, Webb said. But the simpler explanation is that confused, elderly patients misunderstood legitimate medical care, and an overzealous former FBI agent turned that confusion into a witch hunt. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Margaret waited at home, unable to eat or sleep properly. If Foster was acquitted, it would send a message that predators could target seniors with impunity, hiding behind their victim's age and cognitive status. On the 3rd day, her phone rang. It was the prosecutor. "We have a verdict. The verdict is about to be announced. If you're as invested in this story as I am, please take a second to like and subscribe. Your support means everything." Now, let's find out what the jury decided. Part 4: Justice and Redemption. Margaret sat in the courtroom between Claire and Helen, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The jury filed in, their expressions unreadable. Dr. Raymond Foster sat at the defense table, still projecting that professional confidence that had fooled so many people for so long. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud in the first degree." "How do you find guilty?" Margaret felt Claire grab her hand. "On the charge of elder abuse in the first degree? Guilty. On the charge of theft by deception? Guilty." The verdicts continued guilty on all 23 counts. Foster's professional mask finally cracked. His lawyers immediately called for appeal. But it was over. Outside the courthouse, Margaret faced a wall of reporters and cameras. "Professor Walsh, how do you feel about the verdict?" Margaret took a breath. "I feel relieved. But more than that, I feel grateful that I had the resources and support to fight back. Because the truth is, most victims of elder exploitation don't. They don't have a former FBI agent living next door. They don't have medical knowledge to recognize manipulation. They don't have family members who believe them." She looked directly at the cameras. "This case should be a wake-up call. Dr. Foster stole $8 million from vulnerable seniors over 5 years. And he almost got away with it. Because our society is too quick to dismiss elderly people as confused or incompetent. We need better protections, better oversight, and better respect for seniors' autonomy and credibility." A reporter called out, "What would you say to other seniors who suspect they're being exploited? Trust your instincts. Document everything. Find allies. And don't let anyone, not doctors, not family members, not lawyers, dismiss your concerns because of your age. You know your own mind better than anyone else." The sentencing came 2 months later. Dr. Raymond Foster was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Martin Crenshaw received 12 years. Elizabeth Sterling received 8. The Riverside Senior Living Foundation was dissolved. And a federal judge ordered all stolen funds to be returned to victims or their estates. Riverside Senior Living itself faced lawsuits and a complete administrative overhaul. The board fired everyone involved in hiring Foster and implemented new oversight protocols. But Margaret's work wasn't done. She partnered with an advocacy organization to create educational programs about elder financial exploitation. She gave lectures at senior centers, retirement communities, and caregiver conferences. She worked with state legislators to strengthen laws protecting seniors from financial predators. She also wrote a book, The Memory Thief: How I Reclaimed My Mind and Exposed a Predator. It became a bestseller, not because people wanted salacious details, but because it offered practical advice for seniors and families dealing with cognitive changes. One chapter detailed the warning signs of manipulation, sudden changes in financial behavior or will provisions, memory gaps surrounding specific events or appointments, isolation from family and friends by a trusted professional, unexplained transactions or signatures, resistance to independent medical second opinions, cognitive medications that seem to make confusion worse rather than better. Another chapter provided a framework for building cognitive resilience, creating multiple documentation systems that can't all be compromised, maintaining connections with trustworthy people outside any single institution, establishing baseline cognitive testing to distinguish real decline from artificial impairment, understanding your legal rights and protections, knowing the difference between normal aging and manipulation. 6 months after the trial, Margaret received an unexpected visitor. Barbara Reynolds, the woman who'd called after seeing Margaret's television interview, arrived at Riverside with her teenage granddaughter. "I wanted to thank you in person," Barbara said. "After your story, I filed a police report about my mother's death. Turned out the doctor at her retirement home had been running a scheme similar to Foster's. Your case gave prosecutors a roadmap for building their case. He was arrested last month." Margaret felt tears welling up. "Your mother would be proud of you. And you should be proud of yourself. You didn't just get justice for yourself, you opened doors for other families to get justice too." After they left, Margaret sat on her patio, watching the sunset over Riverside's gardens. Helen walked over with 2 glasses of wine. "Big day?" Helen asked, handing her a glass. "Turns out stopping one predator starts a chain reaction. That's how justice works sometimes. One brave person speaks up, and suddenly others find their courage too." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "You know," Margaret said, "when I first started experiencing memory problems, I was terrified. I thought I was losing myself. But in a strange way, this whole experience taught me that I'm more than my memory. My mind, my critical thinking, my will, those are harder to steal than Foster realized." "He chose the wrong victim," Helen said. "No, he chose victims who seemed vulnerable. But what he didn't understand is that vulnerability and powerlessness aren't the same thing. Being 68 and experiencing cognitive changes doesn't make me helpless. If anything, it made me more determined to fight." Helen raised her glass. "To fighting back." "To fight back," Margaret echoed. Epilogue. 1 year after Dr. Raymond Foster's conviction, Margaret stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., testifying before a Senate Committee on Aging. "Members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to speak today about elder financial exploitation and the urgent need for federal protections. My story isn't unique. Every year, seniors lose an estimated $36 billion to financial exploitation. Most cases are never reported because victims are ashamed, afraid, or like I almost was unable to prove what happened to them. The criminals who target us know that our age can be weaponized against us. They know that if we report abuse, we'll be dismissed as confused or paranoid. They know that cognitive impairment, even mild impairment, can be used to undermine our credibility. But here's what they don't know: we're fighters. We're survivors. We've lived 60, 70, 80 years accumulating wisdom, strength, and stubborn determination. We will not be silenced. We will not be erased. And we will not let our vulnerability become their excuse for exploitation. I'm proposing a 3-part framework for federal elder protection. First, mandatory independent oversight for any medical professional, providing both cognitive care and financial advice to seniors. No one person should have that much unchecked power. Second, federal funding for cognitive baseline testing for all seniors who wish to participate. This creates a documented record of cognitive function that can't be manipulated by bad actors, claiming victims were always confused. Third, a national elder exploitation database, similar to sex offender registries, tracking medical professionals, financial advisors, and caregivers who've been convicted of crimes against seniors. Will these measures prevent all elder abuse? No. But they'll make it harder to hide, harder to justify, and harder to get away with. I'm living proof that seniors can fight back. But we shouldn't have to fight alone. It's time for our government to stand with us. The committee room erupted in applause. Several senators came down to shake Margaret's hand and promise action. Claire, watching from the gallery with her husband and 2 children, felt tears streaming down her face. This was her mother, not the confused woman Foster had tried to create, but the brilliant, fierce professor who'd dedicated her life to understanding the human mind and now dedicated her remaining years to protecting others. That evening, Margaret video called Helen, who was back at Riverside. "You were magnificent today," Helen said. The senator from Ohio said. "Your testimony was the most compelling he'd heard in 20 years. We'll see if it leads to actual legislation," Margaret said. "But even if it doesn't, at least we're making noise. We're making it harder for people to ignore elder abuse. You've come a long way from that terrified woman who found a note in her own handwriting." Margaret smiled. "I'm still that woman. I still have memory lapses, sometimes real ones, from actual cognitive changes. I'm still scared of what the future holds. But now I know that fear doesn't mean helplessness. And cognitive changes don't mean I've lost my voice. Dr. Foster learned that the hard way. He did. And now he has 25 years to think about what happens when you underestimate a 68-year-old psychology professor with nothing to lose and everything to fight for." After they hung up, Margaret opened her laptop and started writing. She was working on her second book. This one, a practical guide for families navigating the complex medical and financial systems that surrounded senior care. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Dear Professor Walsh, my grandmother saw your Senate testimony. She's been afraid to report that her financial advisor has been stealing from her. Your courage gave her courage. We filed a police report today. Thank you for fighting for people like her." Margaret saved the text in a folder she'd created called "Why It Matters." The folder contained hundreds of similar messages from families, seniors, advocates, and abuse survivors. She typed back, "Your grandmother's courage is her own. I just helped her remember she had it. Keep fighting." Then Margaret returned to her manuscript. She had work to do. Because somewhere out there, another predator was targeting another vulnerable senior. And somewhere else, another senior was discovering their own strength and preparing to fight back. The memory thief had tried to steal her life. Instead, he'd given her purpose. And Margaret Walsh wasn't done yet. Thank you so much for listening to The Memory Thief. If this story moved you or opened your eyes to the reality of elder exploitation, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more compelling audiobooks. Your support helps bring these important stories to more listeners. Stay vigilant, trust your instincts, and never underestimate the power of determination at any age.